The Redskins, they're planning to release cornerback Josh Norman ahead of the 2020 season. The release comes at the hands of Ron Rivera. Again, the coach for whom Norman was a player from 2012 to 2015. Norman's release now ends his 4-year stint in D.C. But this move by the Redskins should not surprise anybody. It would save them, it's going to save them, $12.5 million. Now, sure, he's already going to count $3 million against the dead cap, but the fact that this man, Josh Norman, has allowed 16 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons, you could argue that he's actually been one of the worst cornerbacks over the last 2 years, and his play has gotten worse since joining Washington back in 2016. Now, you could see that arguably his worst season was in 2019, and for those of you that are fans of Pro Football Focus, they rank 113 cornerbacks. Let me say that one more time. Pro Football Focus ranks 113 cornerbacks. Josh Norman was ranked 111th. Would you really consider paying a player $15 million to be ranked, well, in the bottom 3 at your position? The answer to that is pretty simple. But when Josh Norman first came into the league, he was a lockdown corner. Heck, the dude allowed only 12 touchdowns in 6 years. But over the last 2 seasons, which is what matters now, since turning 30, Josh Norman has allowed 16 touchdowns in 2 seasons. Now, today's show is the top 5 teams that could sign Josh Norman. But before I dive into my top 5, I'm going to make this the pinned comment on today's video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you might get hit with an ad break. I want you to scroll on down, and I want you to leave a comment what team you think Josh Norman will play for in 2020. Let's get in now to my top 5 teams. Number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, you might look at the bottom where it says cap space at negative $1.4 million. Mitch, how's that going to happen? Well, I expect A.J. Boye to leave. I expect a few other players, they're going to leave as well because they're not going to have money to bring them back. The one person who has always kind of believed in Josh Norman, the one person who has gotten along with Josh Norman when other coaches maybe couldn't, it was Jay Gruden. Jay Gruden now is a part of the Jags staff, and he was a man who was like, okay, I want to give him 5 years, $75 million. Obviously, he's not going to get that. Josh Norman isn't going to command top dollar, but the Jags, they need cornerback help, and if you're already then going to lose your top corner in A.J. Boye, maybe you go out and look at a player like Norman, because he can at least help some of these younger players step in and maybe learn the position. Sure, he will never be the elite corner that we saw in 2015 and 2016. But the Jags, they're strapped for cash. Maybe they might not have a better option. But here's another question I want you to really think about, okay? Should Norman retire from the NFL? Type R for retire or type P for play. Obviously, he's made enough money in his career. If he wanted to just ride out into the sunset and live a good life, I'm sure he could do it. Or do you think he wants to come back and play? So let me know in the comments. R for retire or P for play. The number 4 team on my list of Josh Norman destinations, it's the Las Vegas Raiders, who currently have $54.7 million in cap space. That's the 12th most in the NFL. John Gruden, I cover the Raiders. He loves himself some veterans. And also, he's going to trust the word of his brother, Jay Gruden, who, again, has a very good relationship with Josh Norman. The Raiders last season allowed the most pass plays of 20-plus yards, and that simply cannot happen again. With the Raiders moving to Vegas, sometimes you need a big splash. If you are a watcher of the Raiders report, you'll know a few months ago there was a report that came out that the Raiders don't have a lot of money, that Mark Davis is looking for bigger players to bring in some more money to sell tickets. Yes, Norman isn't playing at a high level anymore, but with a big name like Norman in Las Vegas, guess what? That's going to sell some tickets. Now, if you love the NFL, we release daily videos during the entire offseason on the draft, on free agency. So if you want to know where some of these top players are going to land, subscribe to Chat Sports right now. Click that big red button that says subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any videos the entire offseason. And then you see the link below, youtube.com/chatsportstv. Now I'm going to show you the Raiders depth chart because they are very thin. They went out, they tried to get LaMarcus Joyner to play safety. He played nickel. Well, he was actually a little bit better than Josh Norman. Then you got to look at Carl Joseph at strong safety. Are the Raiders going to bring him back? Daryl Worley is a solid cornerback, but I don't know if he's a cornerback 1. Draven Mullen, cornerback 2. The only way that I would think that the Raiders want to bring in a player like Norman is to be extra depth, which, again, they desperately need. Now, did you forget about Valentine's Day? You can be honest with me. I'm here. I'm not going to tell anyone. So you don't end up on the free agent market like Josh Norman, you better cover your you-know-what. Go to chatsports.com/flowers. 50% off all gifts, chocolates, cookies, and yeah, flowers. It's in the name. I'm just trying to help you out. I don't want you to see it get dumped just because you forgot about Valentine's Day. Go to chatsports.com/flowers. 50% off flowers and gifts. Come on, just trying to help you out. So we're going to dive back in now to the top 5 destinations for Josh Norman, and I'm going to go to the third team here, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, to me, they make a lot of sense because of Norman's relationship with head coach Sean McDermott. And maybe, they could be the team that turns his career back around. The Bills, they had a secondary last season that was solid, but you can always use a little bit more depth, right? And if you have a good relationship with the coach, and if you're like, okay, maybe I can bring in this player who he doesn't need to be the star cornerback because he's not that anymore. If we could bring him in and be a solid depth piece, because this Bills team was one of the best defenses in the NFL last year. But the biggest reason why I think that Josh Norman might be really intrigued to join Buffalo is because his best year, the best year for Josh Norman, was back in 2015, when I would argue he was the best cornerback in the entire NFL underneath, guess who? Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator back in 2015 with the Carolina Panthers, and if maybe he can bring back a little bit of the just Josh Norman, maybe we can jump back into that time machine and find me that corner that locked down half the field with 18 pass breakups. He was a villain, but he loved it. Now, sure, he was a player that you'd love to hate, but hey, Josh Norman, he would definitely go back to being 2015. I think the Bills would be okay with that. Now, I know a bunch of you guys kind of get mad at me. I'm not really much of a Madden player. I know a lot of people who subscribe to our channel, you guys are. So how about this? We're going to play a little bit of Madden here. I want you to give me Josh Norman's skill rating, 0 to 100. 0 is obviously he's not even able to play. 100 is he's the best cornerback in the entire NFL. So if you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you see this video, let me know Josh Norman's skill rating. The number 2 team on my list is the team that is ranked dead last in cap space. So how does that going to work? Well, they're going to lose a lot of players. Like, you could see a completely different secondary for the Minnesota Vikings next year. Xavier Rhodes, gone. Mackenzie Alexander, going to be gone. Trey Waynes, gone. Okay? The Vikings will not have money to pay these players. So what does that mean? Well, you might have to go out in the free agent market, and you might have to get some leftovers. Because when you have negative $12 million in cap space, leftovers is what you're going to get. Now, with the Vikings, they're kind of this team in the NFC North that have always been, I'll say, gritty, tough. They want to be that tough defense. Josh Norman, I still think if you asked him, he'd be like, I'm a top corner in the NFL. He's going to bring some toughness. But when I really think about what the Vikings are going to need after losing all these players in free agency, you could maybe go out and see, like, okay, there's not a lot of options out there. We got to go out and get Josh Norman. Now, let's just say no teams want Josh Norman. Maybe we could see him in the XFL. I'm kind of kidding. But I do want to know, are you watching the XFL? It's actually a lot of fun. I watched it this past weekend. I went to a bar. I watched the Dallas Renegades. Yes, they didn't play very well, but I enjoy watching the XFL. I'm a football fiend. So give me a Y for yes. Give me an N for no. And if you want to bet on XFL games the entire offseason, give yourself something a little extra to do on the weekend, go to BetDSI, chatsports.com/bet. Use our promo code NFL120. It's going to get you a 120% deposit bonus. So if you put down $50, get $60 for free. Put down $100, get $120 for free. Pay your bar tab. Bet on the XFL. Have a good time. Chatsports.com/bet. The number 1 team on my list for Josh Norman, it's the Carolina Panthers. I mean, he started his career with the Panthers. He played college football at Coastal Carolina. And let's be frank, the Panthers defense, it needs help. It needed help. Last year, they went 5-11. And they have 11 unrestricted free agents on defense. Like, they're going to lose a lot of talent in that secondary as well. And I'll say this right now. I know the show's not around free agent James Bradberry. James Bradberry is going to go to the Washington Redskins. Like, I think one of the biggest reasons why they cut Norman, or that they're releasing Norman to free up money, is to go out and get James Bradberry, a player that Ron Rivera absolutely loves. So the number 1 team, it is the Carolina Panthers for me. Also, Perry Fewell, he's the defensive back coach of Carolina. Okay? He was the DB coach for the Redskins back in 2016. a coach that wanted Josh Norman, a coach that was willing to pay Norman 5 years, $75 million. That's why the Carolina Panthers are the #1 team for me on the Josh Norman destinations. Now, I want to take you through my top 5 teams one more time. I got the Carolina Panthers at 1, the Minnesota Vikings at 2, Buffalo Bills 3, Raiders at 4, Jacksonville Jags at 5. If you don't like my top 5 teams, or if you want to give me another name, slide in my DMs on Instagram at Mitchell Renz 365.